Everyone. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving break, and now it's time to get back to work. We all been kind of scrambling, trying to play catch up after long weekends, I'm sure, but we're getting there, and then the fun will begin in earnest tomorrow, I guess. But we I hope we'll have shortly Jason Anabatardi joining us via Zoom. Is he on yet? I spoke to him 45 minutes ago, and he's planning to join us. And I think Senator Halpern is in a committee meeting, another committee meeting. Maybe she'll be able to join us before we finish. We don't have any presenters today. I'm just going to kind of recap what we've worked on, and then we'll talk about recommendations. If anybody wants, we probably need to allow sign up sheets if anybody wants to speak after we go through all the recommendations, pro or con, to anything we discuss. They can, but just get my attention, I guess. We'll do that. As is customary, I'd like us to open with a word of prayer, and I haven't asked anybody, so I'm going to put somebody on the spot, and I guess it's going to be Chairman Strickland. What is your number? 6.
6. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Y'all bow with me. God, thank you so much for this day that you've given us, Lord, and thank you for giving us a chance to do this work at the state capitol, Lord. Please guide us and lead us and help us to make the right decisions for all of Georgians, Lord, and please keep us safe over the next week as we dive into deeper issues as well here that affects everybody in this state, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chairman. I've already gone through the welcome and the roll call. Again, we've got 3 members present. This is a 5-member committee, so we do have a quorum, and we expect to have Senator Anabatardi joining us hopefully shortly, and possibly Senator
I'm here,
Halpern.
Jason.
Thank you, Senator Anabatardi. Welcome. Okay, so now we've got 4 here. That's good. All right, I just want to kind of, we've got a draft report that is in your file. Looks like this. And we'll just kind of go through, hit the highlights of that. If you don't mind, I'll just walk us through that. So we've had 3 meetings prior to this one. This is our 4th meeting. We met on August 10th in Macon at the Office of the Secretary of State Licensing Division. We met September 27th here at the state capitol and October 31st here at the state capitol. This study committee was created by Senate Resolution 85 during the 2023 session. And the object of it is to look at what others tell us are onerous occupational licensing requirements in Georgia that can inhibit economic mobility, limit job prospects, and hinder small businesses. And I would add to it kind of stifle entrepreneurship. So we want Georgia to continue to be a robust place for business, number 1 in the nation for business. And these occupational licenses can be a hindrance to a good business environment and good economic development. We heard from folks that more than one group told us that the occupational licensing requirements that we have really disproportionately impact lower income occupations. The time it takes, the cost to get the license, and all of that is a disproportionate burden on some of our best citizens that are out there working hard. August 10th, we heard from Daniela Perry, the Vice President of the Georgia Chamber Foundation. We heard from our very own Sarah Crittenden, Assistant Legislative Counsel. He's here with us today. We heard from Mr. Gabriel Sterling, the Chief Operating Officer of the Secretary of State. That was a good meeting we had that day. And the meeting 2 here at the Capitol. We heard from Mark Hyden, the Director of State Government Affairs for R Street Institute. And you see his testimony in here on page 5. We heard from Austin Bannon, Employment Policy Fellow with Americans for Prosperity. We heard from Dr. Luigi Mancini, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Multicultural Development Institute. Going over to page 7, we heard from Ms. Darlene Lynch, Head of External Relations for the Center for Victims of Torture. And she basically really, her job title did sort of is misleading as far as what she talked about. It wasn't about torture. It was about physicians that are licensed in other countries and trying to eliminate barriers for allowing them to practice here in Georgia is what her topic was. And then also Polly McKinney and Leslie Kelly with Voices for Georgia's Children, and Belisa or Beanie with Sarah Family spoke on that same topic. And then changing gears, we heard from Jay Gaylor and Sarah Boyer with the Georgia's chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. Meeting 3, October 31st, we heard from Miss Shay Ross and Mr. Jamal Lofton with Kaiser Permanente, Georgia. And I did not include this in my one pager of recommendations, but I do want us to, this reminds me, I want to circle back to talk about this, but Virginia has got a successful program that Kaiser Permanente is taking advantage of, where people trained in the military as a corpsman or a medic in the military are given an expedited license, and I guess other medical fields with military training. And Kaiser is hiring a lot of these people with great success. And of course, we've heard over and over about the workforce shortage in healthcare, the healthcare workforce shortage in Georgia. In fact, we have a separate study committee solely dedicated to that topic. But it's real, it's pretty severe. And the demographics of the medical folks that we have, I mean, they're aging out, and it's only going to get worse. So we can't keep doing the same thing and solve that problem. Then we heard from Robin Pinchton and Elizabeth Harrison with the Georgia Nursing Leadership Coalition, and Jamie Kavanaugh and Megan Forbes with the Institute for Justice. And then lastly, we heard from, Spencer Johnson and Trenton Turk and Mark Chastain with the Survey and Mapping Society of Georgia, and Gail Mackey probably with the Georgia Licensed Professional Counseling Association, Rusty Royston with the Soil Science Society of Georgia. So we had a lot of testimony. We heard from a lot of different varied fields. We did not anywhere close get to talking to, we weren't able to talk to everybody. We have, as a reminder, over 40 occupational licenses just under the Secretary of State's office. And then there are other licenses elsewhere in other agencies. So we just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg, frankly. I didn't see in this report, but we did hear from a lady that was a makeup artist. Is that in here somewhere? Who wrote this? Okay.
Our testimony was included in the Institute for Justice.
Okay, no, that's fine. We also had material submitted in written form to the committee, and I probably need to get with you to make sure we include that in our report, I would think. But so lots of good information. there was, kind of a common theme throughout it all, I think, where people were wanting to go to work, delayed from being able to go to work, prohibited from going to work because of our licensing requirements, and a pretty high level of frustration with the process, how aggravating and bureaucratic and burdensome it is, and how long it takes. So that seemed to be kind of a recurring theme. I want to draw your attention to other material we have in our folder today. We've got a letter from the Georgia Forestry Association and a flyer from them where they are requesting that they have their Board of Registrations moved from the Secretary of State's office over to the Georgia Forestry Commission. There is a existing bill alive to do that. It's House Bill 53 that was introduced in 2023. So that's in there for your consideration. I have as recent, so let's look at this email, and it's kind of redacted, so it doesn't reveal any personal information. But as recently as end of October, my office received an email. I'm going to read it to you for the record. I own an occupational medicine practice in Bonaire, Georgia. That's my district. I'm trying to hire a PRN nurse practitioner who is a military spouse. She has been trying for months to get her NP nurse practitioner license transferred from Ohio to Georgia, but has not been successful. I've heard you speak at Eggs and Issues and other events about the frustration around the transfer of license from another state. The candidate is beyond frustrated and feels as if the state has given her the runaround as to what is needed to complete the process. If you have any guidance, it would be appreciated. So we're working with this constituent to try to get that issue resolved. But I get this type of request, probably about every other month, sometimes more than one a month. It's kind of a common request, and I'm sure the other senators do likewise. Just to kind of finish going through what's in the folder today, Representative Chuck Martin, I hate to brag on a House member and a House bill, and especially, but he passed House Bill 155 in the 2023 session. It's a really good piece of legislation. I've got an idea of how we can maybe make it even better. That's what the Senate is here for, to make House legislation better. So we'll talk about that. And then lastly, I thought this memo from FGA, and I forget what that acronym stands for, honestly, but
Foundation for Government Accountability.
Foundation for Government Accountability. It's probably right there.
It's on the second page.
Uh,
I just knew it offhand.
Anyway, I think this capsulates, if that's the right word. Counselor, correct me if I get out of.
Yeah. I'll let you finish first. That one.
A lot of what I hope we can achieve legislatively from this study committee. Some of it is maybe a little beyond what we want to maybe tackle, at least today. But the number one recommendation they had, the Foundation for Government Accountability, very prominent national organization that I'm very familiar with, obviously. They suggest we recognize out-of-state licenses. And really, House Bill 155 actually goes a long way to do that. I think that we did good work when we passed that. Recognize out-of-state work experience. Reduced licensing fees is another idea that I think makes sense. Sunset licensing boards. I think the recognized out-of-state work experience, number 2, also to me ought to apply to recognize military credentialing and military work experience. But that's the information we've included for you today. Do I have any questions or comments from the committee members at this point? I've done a lot of talking. Senator Anabatar, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's just, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We'll hear you very well.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank you and the committee for, I think, doing all this work. I think there's a lot of important information here, and I think beyond the importance of the information, I think is the intentionality that we find ways to support small business owners, entrepreneurs. But for me, I think personally, the biggest takeaway is that with the workforce crisis and the constant increase in costs of doing business in Georgia because of the national and global economy and inflation, hopefully we'll see some legislation, some policy work, and maybe even some rule changes with some of our state agencies to help. I think some of the folks that we've engaged with, heard from, and talked to, I think this is an opportunity to give those, you said this in the beginning of your comments, an opportunity for those that are in poverty or blue collar workers and others that are working hard to, make ends meet, put food on the table, take care of their families. I think an opportunity for us to kind of lead and provide opportunity by eliminating unnecessary licenses or, fees or taxes or other things that may get in the way, or even just the approval process for some of these industries to go through. And I think whatever we can also do to support honorably discharged veterans that are looking for new careers and wanting to do new things outside of the world that they are accustomed to having maybe served in and worked in, here in America or abroad. I think this topic of, occupational licenses impacts that group of citizens and families across Georgia more than, we think. I know Senator Dugan understands that and others. So I just want to say thanks, and hopefully, out of this, we'll see some positives that we can do to impact many of the citizens in Georgia in the weeks and months to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, regarding the report, before we get to the recommendations, which will be included in the report, do any of the committee members, and I know this really isn't very fair because you just got it, but do y'all see anything you need to add, delete, anything like that?
One thing you might want to add would just be the stuff that was also provided.
Right, and I'll do that if y'all are okay with me doing it after the fact. I do think we're gonna be required to vote on this report today. Our deadline is December 1st, so.
You can, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. You can do this like attachment 1, attachment 2, so you don't have to retype it all into the thing. You can just say, and enclose attachments. And then
That's a good idea. Is that,
We can make like an appendix with all of that information in it.
that'd be awesome. Good idea. Thank you. Drop the mic. The only thing I guess on page 10, and this is just just me, I guess, but most of these things have a heading. Seems like that last committee, I guess that's under the practical strategy, so maybe that fits like that.
I can insert like that. It wouldn't change the report. If that makes sense, I feel like that's fine.
I think that would read a little easier, maybe.
what would your heading be? So we don't have to clarify.
Occupation, like very personal experiences with occupational licensing.
Well, I guess what I was talking about is that very last paragraph on page 10, maybe put, request or recommendation from Samsog
Okay.
as a heading, which is the Survey and Mapping Society of Georgia.
Okay.
Just so it just gets kind of lost to me in that. You okay with that?
Like if we put that, because you're gonna have to call and vote of the recommendation as amended. And we just have to, yes, it makes perfect sense.
Just keep me straight on this. Okay, but I'll do, well, if you're okay with that, we'll do it. Y'all help me say the right stuff when we go to vote on this, because I guess we're gonna amend it with some recommendations anyway. Right? Okay, so let's get to the recommendations.
If, I'm sorry. If we're gonna modify this thing, the scrivener error, but if we're gonna modify it, if you go to page 9, you look up under in the Virginia paragraph, you go down to the fourth sentence, the last word, and then on the fourth line. I think that should be an E in there.
Okay. I'll check that.
If that was the only thing, I wouldn't have something.
Files, right, yeah.
We gotta do read this thing.
That's good. You read fast. You read fast. So we got that. You found that. Okay. Recommendations. And these again are my ideas, and it's open for discussion, debate, amendment, whatever. And we had a scrivener's error here too on number 3. Number 1, pass Senate Bill 157, and I'd like Senator Strickland to remind us what that is and where the posture is on that.
Yeah, so that bill passed the Senate, I believe it was 55-0 this past session, and still sits in the House. It made it out of the House Judiciary Committee, did not make it out of rules on the last day for a floor vote. But that bill is the one that deals with how criminal records are treated when it comes to occupational licensing boards. And one of the big things we heard going back to the theme of all this is the idea that sometimes what I would also say, not just sometimes our lower paid workers, but your most vulnerable people that are sometimes in bad circumstances that then have to deal with navigating a process that, even if it's not overly burdensome, can seem so burdensome that sometimes they even try to work in certain areas. And 157 deals with how your past criminal history is treated by boards. And when we had the bill go through the committee process last year, the best testimony we had was from individuals who had previous mistakes they made, and they're trying so hard to now move past that and bring generational change to their families by not just being a product of the criminal justice system, yet they get this wall. And many times they don't even know how something I did 10 years ago will impact me. So why go get trained? Why invest money to become an electrician, whatever it is? And if I'm going to be told no because of a mistake I made 10 years ago. And so that bill makes it where every board is only going to consider certain offenses that are directly related to the certain industry and the public safety. For example, someone that had a past DUI could still be an electrician, but someone that has a history of stealing from people probably shouldn't be working in a nursing home. And so it creates a standard where we're really going to make sure that we know that the criminal offense is directly connected to the industry that someone wants to work in. And maybe that's a great part of the bill. Maybe the best part of the bill is that now every board's going to publish which offenses keep you from working in certain areas. And an individual can get what we call a pre-clearance, where you can go and apply before you get training to a board to see how your criminal history will impact you when it comes time to get a license. So again, that bill passed the Senate, and I think we've got support in the House. It just got wrapped up, and like a lot of our bills in day 40, all the back and forth, it kind of got lost in shuffles. Hopefully we'll get that done quickly this next year.
So will that go back to House Judiciary or?
I believe so. Go back to the committee that it came from. I believe that's still the process.
Okay.
So back in the House Judiciary Committee.
It's not to agrees and disagrees. I mean,
No, it didn't get that far.
okay.
Thank you. Number 2, implement changes requested by the Surveying and Mapping Society of Georgia. also known as SAMSOG, and supported by the Georgia State Board of Registration for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. I don't remember exactly all the details of their testimony, but basically they took the initiative to come forward with a proposal to streamline the experience, first of all, to allow testing, change the time frame when people can do the test, which is they can do the test right after they finish their education and don't have to wait for all the field experience to then take the test after maybe they've are a little fuzzy on some of the education piece. And the other was to reduce the number of years that they had to have field experience. And it was like a kind of a matrix based on whether they had a high school diploma, an associate's degree, or a 4-year college bachelor's degree. And this is the industry itself, including the board, the licensing board, proposing a solution because they see such a problem with getting people to come into their field and stay, and such a workforce shortage. To me, that's an easy thing that we can do to try to accommodate this industry. There may be some interest once we start this from the professional engineers to do something similar. So I'm told. So we may end up wanting to include them in some legislation. Any discussion of that or questions?
Have you talked with the governor's office about this?
I have not.
Okay.
Have you?
I'm just reading the background of what they're proposing here.
No, we're on surveying and mapping. I think you're looking at Georgia
I
Forestry.
am. I already went past the survey and mapping. I'm good with that one.
I think the surveying mapping's non-controversial and sort of almost an internal issue there. I don't see any pushback there. But I've been surprised sometimes before. I'm sure I will be again.
Probably hear from someone first.
All right. Moving on, number 3, this is the one on the Georgia Forestry. And there's a letter and a flyer in the folder. There was a bill introduced in the House. I think it's House Bill 53. It's still in the House. I, of course, represent a lot of forestry area, and I would like to accommodate their request. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, the Georgia Forestry Commission is amenable or agreeable to doing this. So I've talked to Director Lattimore about it. And he said as long as the funding, the license fees come to his agency where he can administer this, he's happy to do it. He's appointed by the governor. I assume he's talked to the governor about it. But he has testified, not in front of us, but in front of a committee that he's willing to take this on. He's not lobbying to take it on, but he's willing to take it on. I think is an accurate characterization. So I think there's a lot more synergy having them under the Georgia Forestry Commission, where he's dealing with people that understand what foresters do and what forestry is about. So I would make that recommendation. You all can.
But without having 53 in front of us, as long as they're not doing away with the board, they're just moving where the board is housed. I don't think they'll have as much of an issue. When I first read it, it looked like they were doing away with the governor's appointed board with that responsibility. I was thinking that's not gonna go over well. But if it's just moving the board.
It's just moving the board is
Okay.
my understanding.
And that's how you worded your recommendations. You didn't mention the House bill even, so.
And again, that may not be anything that we would act on in the Senate until, we see what happens with House Bill 53, but I think it makes sense. They're frustrated where they're at, frankly. Number 4, this is sort of just real broad, but it gets to the crux of a lot of what we've heard in the testimony and what we've discussed. We have a good many licenses on our books that almost no other states require. We have several that maybe say 3 or 4 states other than Georgia requires. To me, when you're an outlier like that, it should give you pause to look at, why are we doing it different than everybody else? And so this is just sort of based on the Supreme Court case on the lactation consultants, that Jackson versus Raffensperger, where they said the government bears the burden of providing a legitimate interest or reason for a license under the Georgia Constitution. I think we ought to just, as a sort of a kind of guiding principle, say that we'd like to sunset licensing requirements where the license is not proven necessary to protect the public health, public safety, or public welfare, consumer protection, safety, that kind of thing. And then I gave some examples of types of licenses that at least I have in mind that might fit that category. That would be up for discussion and debate and more committee hearings and more testimony. But a low voltage contractor installs phone systems, security systems. I mean, you know more about this than I do. I think only 3 or 4 states license that. Why we do, I really don't know. We heard testimony from the lady saying all she wanted to do was open up a shop to do makeup. She wasn't going to cut hair or color hair or anything like that. She has to go through the whole cosmetology licensing process, 1,500 hours of experience, lots of money to go to school. I mean, I think lots of money, $20,000-$30,000. And we have people doing that at Dillard's or Macy's that aren't licensed, and people do it at home that aren't licensed, and people can do it on a movie set without a license. That's just some examples. Any heartburn with that? Questions, concerns? All right. Number 5, early on the first meeting, we heard from Gabriel Sterling with the Secretary of State's office. He talked to us about their modernization initiative where they are implementing new software and a new system to more efficiently manage the licensing process. He talked about some funding needs there. And I think there are, you can make a legitimate argument that they don't have the financial resources to properly do what they are required to do. Our state now is almost 11 million people. A lot more people applying for licenses, renewing licenses, and we haven't kept up with the times financially or with technology. So that's my attempt to indicate that I would be supportive anyway of hearing what their budget needs are to and seeing what kind of return the state would get if we were to appropriate that. Anything there? Number 6, that's really the sort of the same thing. Juliana's here. She represents some of the nursing groups, but I've heard for years and years that the nursing board is understaffed. the people they have they can't retain employees because they are not paid market, adequately. And that's part of the backlog on the nursing licensing. So I think we need to, from an appropriation standpoint, look at that and be open-minded to allocating more resources to that. Same thing on number 7. Number 8, and this gets kind of to the email I received from a constituent and problems we hear over and over, and I may call on Juliana to speak to this, but nurses are licensed by the nursing board. If they're an advanced nurse, which means they have an advanced degree, like they're a CRNA or they're a what else, Juliana? Sorry.
Five categories, nurse practitioner, nurse midwife, nurse anesthetist, certified nurse, nursing, not CN, not certified nurse, they're do not have APR, but they're like 5 different categories.
And so these advanced educated nurses with advanced degrees work under a protocol agreement with a licensed physician and they are able to do more than a nurse that doesn't have the advanced degrees because they're working under the supervision of the physician. Well, they get the license with the nursing board, and then they've got to get their protocol agreement approved from the composite medical board, and it can sit there literally all for 6 months, a year. And a lot of times they have trouble getting a status of what's going on with it. Or that they finally get somebody and they say, well, you didn't fill out this right or that, and it just goes back and forth. It just seems real problematic to me. My idea for a solution to this, and again, there probably is a better idea than this, but this is mine now. I'd like to have some robust discussion and debate on this topic. And I'd like it to be in our recommendations to generate that. But I think after they submit a totally completed application to the composite medical board, they ought to be deemed, after 30 days, they ought to be deemed approved and be able to go to work. They're already licensed and they have oversight from the nursing board already. The physician is already licensed and has oversight from the composite medical board. I don't understand really why the protocol agreement even has to be approved at all, but this would at least give the composite medical board 30 days to respond if there's an issue. Otherwise, they should be able to go to work. They could do it as a provisional license if they wanted to. I mean, I don't have all the details in my mind worked out, but yes, sir.
2 questions, Chairman, if I may. One, I thought Gabe said something about they were going to an online application process that was being phased in,
I think he did say that.
which should speed up that process.
For the protocol, that would be for the APRN. Once you get.
Juliana, do you mind to go to the podium and introduce yourself
Yeah,
for the record?
I'm Juliana McConnell, and I represent United APRNs, and I work also the representative for the Deans and Directors Association and Georgia Nursing Leadership Coalition. What the Secretary of State, since the APRNs, right now, they receive an authorization to practice. We had legislation that would, instead of an authorization, they would get a license. We're only one of 11 states that do not issue an APRN license. There was some concern with the governor's legal counsel that there was not adequate implementation moving from that authorization to a license. So the author of the bill, Senator Hostetler, asked that the bill that the governor veto the bill. So we're working on that right now and working with the Secretary of State's office. But what they're talking about, Senator Dubin, that would be the APRN license, once we get a license, or even right now, the authorization to practice. But that's for them to get their APRN. But then if they must have a protocol agreement with a physician, and that if they're going to get that, also enables them to get like a DEA number so that they can write prescriptions. Okay, that protocol agreement is the one that must be approved by the Composite Medical Board. And you are correct. We have backlogs. We have examples of going from 6, 7+ months before that particular, the protocol agreement between the APRN and the physician. And so that's where Senator Walker is referring to. Once that APRN and that physician, once they prepare their protocol agreement, and in that protocol agreement, that enables the physician, they give that APRN, for example, the ability to write radiographic imaging orders, the authorization to write prescriptions. So they can only do that if it's included in that agreement between that physician and that APRN. And the majority of the time too, they must pay many times a monthly amount to that physician for that protocol agreement. And that is then, so they're getting an approval from the Board of Medicine, and they're also getting their approval as a advanced practice nurse through the nursing board. So they're really working with two different boards. So where we're trying to, I think Senator Walker was saying, once that position and that APRN, that if they come together and they approve the protocol agreement, then to allow them to they could be filed with the Board of Medicine, I think is what he was recommending. But right now it must be approved by the Board of Medicine. So is there any other questions?
Yeah, I didn't have as many questions as I have now.
I'm sorry.
Did you just tell me the APRNs have to pay to do their job?
If they, for a protocol agreement with a physician, if it's in certain situations, they can have to pay up to, like, I've heard them $1,000 or more per month with that physician.
To have the physician agree to let them do their job?
Yeah, and well, the physician with that protocol agreement, they authorize them because they're working under the supervision of that physician. Now, the physician is then required to review and sign off on 10% of their medical charts. So in a month's time, if they see however many patients that APRN does see in a month, then they must approve 10% of that physician must approve 10% of them. They don't actually see, and most of the time, they do not see that patient, but they sign off on the on 10% of their records.
Okay.
And it's a little confusing because we have in the statute there, and that's also another thing we're trying to, eventually look at and examine, because you have an APRN, like, for example, my husband had several years ago, he had a kidney stone. So we went to a clinic in Beaufort, Georgia. Okay. And there was the APRN there. Now, there was not a physician. It was late Friday afternoon. Okay, that nurse practitioner could write the order for him to have a CT scan. Yes, you've got a kidney stone. Okay, he's in terrible pain. Instead, he's probably going to be in a lot of pain, but it'll probably dissolve by Monday. But I can't even give you one prescription because I can't write Schedule 2. Now, you could write like an antibiotic, but not Schedule 2, like a hydrocodone or whatever, some kind of pain medicine. So we had to leave Beaufort and drive all the way to the Emory Clinic at Flowery Branch. I mean, not Flowery Branch, and about 30 miles away, and spend the night in the emergency room. Now, when you had the nurse practitioner or a PA and the hospital, they could, because the physician is there and they're working under the oversight of that physician in the hospital, and that falls under a different code section, then they immediately started him on a pain medication. That at that time it was the PA. The PAs and the APRNs have comparable scopes, right, and comparable barriers. That's the reason we're working jointly with them. But because that PA was in the hospital, immediately started him on medication, on pain meds. And then we spent the night. So we had to spend 30, 45 minutes getting there in pain, pay for another CT scan, a night in the emergency room because that PA could not write a Schedule II that was in the clinic with a physician. And that's kind of a side note on just the kind of barriers that we're facing right now. But right now we're talking about even getting started an APRN. And we have right now a legislator I'm working with that has a daughter that just graduated. Okay, they got their APRN, they met all the requirements, graduated to become an APRN. Took them 6 weeks to get their license at the board of nursing. But then they have to, once they get their license, if they're going to be working in certain situations and they need a protocol agreement with a physician, then they have to get that approved by the Composite Medical Board. And that's where right now it can take, we've got a stack of issues coming from APRNs where they've lost jobs because it took them 6 months to get that protocol agreement approved by the Composite Medical Board.
And
So that's the reason
also,
we need to look at something to where we can make that shorter.
And if your protocol agreement is with Dr. Smith and Dr. Smith retires and the nurse goes to work with Dr. Jones, they got to go through it again. And so she can't work or to work to her full scope while she's waiting again for that protocol agreement to be approved.
I have one, I don't know, we don't go too far down this road, I guess, here, but one question I would have is what is the Composite Medical Board, what are they looking at, whether or not they accept or reject a protocol agreement? What's the standard they're looking at?
Well, one of the problems I understand they're having right now, because it's gone from like a very short form, now it's like a multi-page, very complicated form actually to complete.
Right.
So I think we've heard that when they complete these forms, only about 25% of them are completed correctly the first time, because and you're talking about APRNs who have master's degrees, some of them even doctorate degrees, that the form is so onerous and so complicated to complete that only 25% of them completed the first time. Then they've got to come back and correct the completion of it. There have been some issues also with the protocol agreement that if you are a nurse practitioner, like if you've got to have also supervision in the area of what you're trying to work in your area of expertise. So sometimes that is a reason that they may come back and say, no, this protocol agreement, this physician cannot be your supervisor. You cannot have a supervising, but it's just, and I think it's just also just maybe the resources there. It's just like the Board of Nursing. It's not that complicated a process with the Board of Nursing. Hopefully now too, once this is automated, it's going to expedite the process. But right now it's on average taking 4, 5, and 6 weeks just to get that APRN, either new license or renewal completed. And it's the people that we work with at the Board of Nursing are excellent and they do a great job. Their executive director is doing a phenomenal job. It's just they don't have the resources available to meet those numbers and getting those license either renewed or new license administered.
So it sounds like there is a benefit to having the Composite Medical Board review these agreements. It's just a matter of how long it's taken to get it done right now. I mean, you're not advocating that we no longer have them reviewed, because it sounds like you said about 25% of them at least have issues with how they're done, not done correctly. And so I don't think nobody's advocating necessarily get rid of that process, are we?
Well, I think like Senator Walker said, I think this is something we really need to really sit down and take a look at that. And because why is it though, if there's an agreement when you have a medical physician, okay, a doctor, and you have an APRN who has a master's and doctorate degree, why they can't also look at the form itself.
Sure.
they should be able to complete a form between these two professional individuals. And then with maybe, like he said, with a 30-day, just in case there's an issue doing, I don't know, background check or whatever. But it should be able to, that physician and that nurse practitioner be able to come to fill out a form and a supervisory form together.
I don't want to run this too far down the rabbit hole, but my understanding is these are all hard copy documents that are sent to the composite medical board. It's stuff on a form that is on paper that is sent as a packet. Is that true or not?
I will have to, that was my understanding, but I cannot for a fact tell you that it's not automated.
That's why I
But,
was going back to what I was talking about a little while ago about doing it online. You know, when you're on your daily Amazon purchase and you leave something out of a column, it says stop,
Yeah,
you
it
can't
tells
go
you.
ahead. And so what I'm thinking is even that would help speed up the process. So it's not that you've missed checking a box on a piece of paper. It's a required spot in the online file that won't let you proceed unless you
Mhm.
do that.
To me, I agree that would be extremely helpful and speed the process, but to me, Senator Dugan, this is not unlike the study committee I served on with you when I first got elected, where we were looking at DBHDD and DCH and all the duplicative oversight and all the confusion and costs that caused. To me, you've got a licensed nurse that has already had a background check, or she wouldn't be able to get her license. You've got a licensed physician that's already had a background check. He wouldn't be licensed, hopefully, if he, had done something wrong. Really, it's a private agreement, essentially, between the doctor, an employment agreement between the doctor and the advanced nurse. And I don't know where the state's role is in approving that employment agreement, as long as they are acting within their scope of practice and their license. To me, it's like the composite medical board, I can see why they want to have it on file in case an issue arose with a physician or a nurse to say, who all is this person working with? But the approval process, I don't see a whole lot of value in it. If a doctor is doesn't match up right with the skill set of the nurse, I mean, to me, that's they're setting themselves up for a big time lawsuit, probably. I mean, I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of value in it, and I think it needs to be. But I do think this is an issue we could have several committee meetings on and bring the composite medical board back in and really hash this thing out. This may not be the right way to put it on our radar, but I'd like it to be a topic of, it's something I'm very interested in trying to improve.
And I agree with you. It on the surface to a layman, it doesn't make sense to me. But I would like to see why they've been doing it. And if we're gonna adequately fund it by doing away with it, then we just adequately funded it right there because they no longer exist. So.
Well, I'm not suggesting doing away with the composite medical board.
Just their responsibility.
This would take
Just
some.
that one
I mean,
oversight.
they've still got all the physicians to look after.
Let's put it on there. You know, we will be fully informed by the.
Good conversation started.
The number 9 might be too ambiguous and too far reaching, or so ambiguous that it could be far reaching. But I just put it on there because I like the terminology universal recognition, I guess.
So you're talking about like composite boards or what do you call them? The articulation agreements with other states, the
Reciprocal,
second compacts. I need to start with a C.
yes, that's a part of what yes, sir. Is one way to do it. Okay, so number 10, I think what I wanted to talk about on this one is we heard testimony. So House Bill 155 goes a long way to allowing for or requiring expedited licenses for military spouses, and then licenses by endorsement for everybody else that moves into Georgia and has a very similar license in another state. But it gives them 90 days to issue their license. I would like to see us go to 30 days after 30 days once all the requirements are completed. Because to me, even 90 days is too long to have to wait to be able to go to work. The biggest pushback I think I heard when we were in Macon was, well, we're having to wait on criminal background checks. And we got to go through a federal, some sort of bureau, and it's taken, 45, 60, 90 days to get it. My solution to that, or my suggestion to that, is have the person on the application include a sworn affidavit in front of a notary saying that they have no criminal record. And if the background check comes back otherwise, they can revoke their license. But I think there's pretty straightforward, if you falsify something under a sworn affidavit, you could be, held criminally liable for that, seems like to me. So that would be how I would address that issue. Jump in, man.
Yeah, I mean, we're not getting it done in 7 months now. And you're wanting to take it for 3 months to a month. Yeah, it sounds good. I just don't know how you're gonna get from point A to point B. And we've said consistently that if it's not for the health and safety of the Georgia citizens, then review it. I'm looking at that headline in the paper where new practitioner under the guidance of a new Georgia law passed by so-and-so went to work after falsifying their comments on they're about made a criminal act saying that they didn't have a criminal background, which I could see where those two could possibly happen, hoping that they don't get caught, and then something bad happened.
Okay.
So I would rather give them a hard stop 90-day deadline on this thing and say, look, you got 90 days. We're going to fund you. We're going to give you the resources to do it, but you got 90 days. And after that, it's on you to see how they go that way. But I just taking it from 7 months to a month.
Okay, so what I am in number 10, what I'm talking about. So you have a copy of this in your folder, HB 155. And if you look, I highlighted on page 3, the 90 days on line 67. But if you move up to line 49, where it excludes firefighters. I don't really know why firefighters exactly, but it excludes firefighters, healthcare providers, and law enforcement officers. So this is talking about occupational licenses other than firefighters, healthcare providers, or law enforcement officers. And healthcare providers is defined on line 19, and it includes physicians, optometrists, pharmacists, counselors, social worker, registered nurse, advanced nurse, EMTs, all of that. So we're talking about licenses other than healthcare and law enforcement.
And they'd have to have a license in another state that's current and be in good standing as well. Because I understand what you're saying. I do think we minimize that risk by excluding people working in healthcare and law enforcement, about firefighters too. We also minimize that risk with having a current license in another state. But there is still the concern. I think that you have the state background check, if I remember right on this. But then the federal is the fingerprint base. I mean, they run that's federal that would catch everything, and that's a concern is not having that available yet.
But she bragged about their average turnaround time was 14 days or something like that. But that's not what we hear from constituents, so I don't know. I'm a 14 might not have been the number, but it was way less than 30.
Our fighters are because of a CDL license.
Maybe.
That's. It's a, we passed 3 years ago, changed their standing.
Okay.
I'm all about moving forward. I just don't want to pass a law that's unattainable. And
Think you're being realistic and pragmatic.
that would be the first time for me, but but I also understand that we're not passing this bill on the floor today.
Right.
We're putting together a framework for further, more detailed discussion by a broader body to look at.
Yes, sir.
So it's not one of those things I'm gonna jump up and down and say, no, I won't support that.
I agree.
Okay, well, thank you. And I added an 11 as we were going through the report. And again, this is really just something I kind of want to look into. It doesn't even have to be in the recommendations because I can do it as a senator anyway. But I think what they're doing in Virginia, what Kaiser Permanente talked to us about, is worth exploring to see if we want to have a version of that in Georgia, and it's called the Military Medic and Corpsman Program, MMAC program. So my number 11, I guess, would be consider adoption of a VA type model of the Military Medic and Corpsman program.
That was in here, it's in the packet.
Yes, sir. Senator Avatar, are you asleep?
Make him turn his camera on.
Yeah, are we gonna go to the floor of the Senate, debate all this?
You have a motion?
I have a motion to pass to adopt the report whenever the chairman is ready.
I hope I am.
All right, I have a motion.
I'm wide awake.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Thank you all. Y'all been excellent to work with. So now we'll vote.
Thank us to the
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, like sign? All right, thank you very much. We got it done. I enjoyed working.
Great
with
job.
you. Thank you.
Thank
All
Mr.
right,
Chairman.
so now we'll adjourn the meeting.
He turns his camera.